Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today from Maine and from several other states in the United States. My name is Jenny Smith-Brock. I'm the director of the Smart Learning Lab at the University of Southern Maine. The Smart Learning Lab is funded by the Reading Matters to Maine Fund of the Maine Community Foundation. The lab provides low-cost tutoring to elementary students who are well behind in reading. Tutoring is free for students who qualify for free or reduced lunch. In addition, SMART, as part of the Southern Maine Area Resource Team, offers professional development opportunities for educators. Please note, if you have requested a certificate of attendance, I will be emailing those to the attendees. This webinar is being recorded. I will email it to attendees, and the recording will be posted ultimately on our website, www.smartlearninglab.org. By the way, you won't be able to see Elizabeth or myself during the webinar. Unfortunately, if we activate our webcams, the recording won't capture the all-important PowerPoint. So the PowerPoint is what will be shown. Today's webinar is the second in a series of 2 webinars which focus on an approach to teaching decoding skills called synthetic phonics. Synthetic phonics is now widely used in England. It has also been praised by Dr. Sally Shaywitz, author of the book Overcoming Dyslexia. It is different in quite a few ways from the types of phonics typically taught here in the US. You can certainly view today's webinar without having seen the previous one, but I do recommend taking the time to view both to get a full picture of what is so exciting about this approach to teaching reading. Today, I'm very pleased to have Elizabeth Nonweiler here with us. She is a world-renowned independent trainer of several synthetic phonics programs. She has been hired by school districts and by national governments in 19 nations around the globe. Elizabeth and I are not in the same room right now. In fact, we are in different countries, so please be patient with any glitches in the webinar. During a practice session that we this weekend, we did experience a glitch that interrupted our audio for a minute or 2. I believe that has been resolved, but if it happens again, please wait patiently for the audio connection to return. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the questions box located on the GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side of the screen. I now welcome Elizabeth Nonweiler and hand over the microphone to her.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Elizabeth, and I'm thrilled to be here today talking to you from Newbury in England. I'm grateful to Jenny for inviting me and to Beth for providing the background to my talk today, which is about how young children are taught to read and write with synthetic phonics. I was a class teacher for 30 years, and I taught reading and writing using mixed methods, or what you might call balanced literacy. I got a job in a school that had failed an inspection because of the children's poor behaviour and poor literacy skills. The new principal asked me to introduce a programme called Jolly Phonics. I was amazed at the speed children learned to read with Jolly Phonics and how confident they became, and so I wanted to share what I'd found out with other teachers, and that's why I moved into teacher training. Jolly Phonics was published in 1992, and it teaches phonics very effectively using synthetic phonics principles, although no one called it synthetic phonics in 1992. So why is synthetic? Why? I'm sorry, I got confused with the changing the slides then, but I've got it now. Why is effective teaching of phonics so important? Well, first, as they progress through school, children are increasingly asked to read texts in order to learn about science, history, geography, and so on. But children who struggle to read words can't concentrate on meaning, and so they can't learn from reading. And children who struggle to read words don't like reading. But children who are taught phonics effectively learn to read words easily, and then they're free to concentrate on meaning and to enjoy their reading. Here's what I plan to talk about in our short session today: synthetic phonics teaching principles, lessons, progression, and practice and application. So now let's look at synthetic phonics teaching principles. Teach to Read is the name of my training and consultation business. It's called Teach to Read because it's about direct teaching. It's not about creating a classroom where children are expected to learn by themselves at their own rate. I've put my email address on the slide, and you're welcome to contact me if you want to ask any questions or tell me about your experiences teaching reading and writing. It's important to understand the simple view of reading to teach synthetic phonics effectively. The simple view of reading identifies two skills: decoding and comprehension, and both are essential. Decoding is essential for reading. Language comprehension is more important than decoding because it's essential for both spoken and written language. With synthetic phonics, we teach children to read accurately from the start. But if they know only a few letter-sound correspondences, they can't read many words accurately. So we develop comprehension through spoken language. Conversation, vocabulary, poetry, rhymes, role play, storytelling, and this is very important, reading books to children. So, daily literacy for beginner readers with synthetic phonics involves developing comprehension through spoken language, teaching synthetic phonics, and providing activities for the children to practice and apply the phonics that's been taught. So what is synthetic phonics? With synthetic phonics, first children learn the correspondences between sounds and letters. For example, sh is spelt with sh, e can be spelt with two e's, and p is spelt with p. Then they blend the sounds to read words: sh, e, p, sheep. They do both in every lesson, learn the sound to letter correspondences and read words by blending the sounds. So synthetic phonics is about how sounds are represented by letters and how we decode letters to say the sounds, and read words by blending the sounds. But synthetic phonics teaching is more than that. With synthetic phonics teaching, we also teach spelling and handwriting. We teach spelling as the reverse of reading. For spelling, first children listen to the spoken word, then they identify the sounds in the word, and then they write letters for the sounds that they've identified. For example, when they hear the word dog, they repeat the word and say the sounds: dog, d, o, g. Then they write letters for d, o, g. Oh, now I'm getting to the wrong slide. Where are we? Here we are. So with synthetic phonics, children are systematically taught sound to letter correspondences, to read words by blending sounds, to spell by identifying the sounds in words, sometimes described as segmenting spoken words, and to form letters correctly. We don't use the letter names with children at first. We just show them the letters and say the sounds. Last week, Beth talked about the history of look and say, whole language, and balanced literacy. Synthetic phonics is none of these. It's not about learning phonemic awareness without letters. It's not about sight words without phonics. It's not about guessing strategies. No guessing from pictures or context or grammar, or the first letter or the first few letters. Instead, it's about teaching children to use phonics to read words accurately. Well, why not use a range of strategies? Because memorizing enough words without phonics is impossible. Guessing strategies may work with books designed for teaching children to read by guessing, but they don't work later when the children see an unfamiliar word in a text with no pictures. And if you encourage guessing strategies, the children who find phonics difficult will get in the habit of always using the guessing strategies, and they won't work when they're older. Okay, back to synthetic phonics. Let's look at what you need to teach synthetic phonics. The essential resources are a board for the teacher to write on and something to write with, something for each child to write on and something to write with. It could be paper and pencil, a mini whiteboard and pen. I was training teachers in Cameroon and Africa recently, and they use slates and chalk. And you must have a systematic program to follow, because you can't teach synthetic phonics well without following a program. Here's a list of synthetic phonics programs. They all include the core criteria for a synthetic phonics program, but they're different in other ways. Beth mentioned Jolly Phonics, and so did I at the beginning of my talk. One of the ways Jolly Phonics is special is that it includes stories, actions, and songs for sounds. Do you remember the one for ah? Ah, ah, hands on my arm, ah, ah, hands on my arm, ah, ah, hands on my arm, they're causing me alarm. And as you can tell, I'm not good at singing, but I don't mind doing it with children. Beth also mentioned sound discovery. Its biggest strength is the number of clear, detailed lesson plans it provides. They're called snappy lessons. Phonics International is an online program with resources for teachers. Phonics Bag is an online program to use interactively in the classroom with the children. And so on. All these programs teach the English alphabetic code systematically and how to use the code to read and write words. We have an alphabetic code for written English, and the letters represent sounds, and the English code is complex. Beth talked about the history of written English and explained why it's so complex. With synthetic phonics, we teach children the English alphabetic code in detail, from simple to complex. We teach reading and spelling together in the same lesson, from letters to sounds for reading, and from sounds to letters for spelling. I'm going to use the terms phonemes and graphemes sometimes to be more accurate, and I know some of you are already familiar with these words. Phonemes are sounds and graphemes are letters. One phoneme is represented by one grapheme. You hear a phoneme and you see a grapheme. So I've drawn a picture of a phone for phonemes and a picture of a graph for graphemes. There are about 42 sounds or phonemes in English, although the exact number varies according to regional accents and how you analyse the sounds. We teach from the sounds to the letters that are used to represent them, not from the alphabet to the sounds. Here's one way of spelling 42 phonemes of English. As Beth explained, there are other common ways to spell some of them, and uncommon ways, and I'm going to talk about those later. I'm going to say each of the sounds. I'm not going to try to use an American accent, because I'd probably do it very badly, except to pronounce the vowels ending in R in the last line, because that is different in most regions of England, and it's not difficult to change. By the way, this is not the order you teach them in. This is the order I use to explain to adults. It helps you to think about what the sounds of English are. If I was doing this in French, I'd have sounds like un and en and u. But this is English. So here we go. I'm going to read from left to right. I'll start with the consonant sounds. P, t, k, ch, f, s, sh, h, u. You can tell I'm avoiding saying at the end of the sounds, because if you say at the end, it's more difficult for children to blend. Think of s, p, or t. Blend it and you get sup or t. Think of sp or t. Blend and you get sport. So, starting again from the second line. S, sh, h, b, d, g, j, v, z, j, w, y. That's the consonant sounds. Now the vowel sounds of English. E, I, E, A, O, U, A, I, ow, O, oi, or, R, and is the sound like the one at the end of America. Americ, We don't say America, we say America. It's the most common sound in English. The complexity of English can be explained logically as follows. Remember, this is what we teach, except that we teach it in a way that's suitable for young children. First, we have 26 letters, but more than 40 sounds. So sometimes a grapheme has one letter, but sometimes we put more than one letter together to make one grapheme. With M is spelt with one letter. Sh with SH is spelt with two letters. I with IGH, as in high, is spelt with three letters. Oo with OUGH, as in through, is spelt with four letters. That's the first complication of English. Here are the next two. Number 2. One phoneme may be represented by one or more graphemes. For example, I may be represented with IE, as in pie, I and E with another letter in between, as in kite, or IGH as in fight, Y as in my, or I on its own as in find. Now the last complication. One grapheme may be code from one or more phonemes, and Beth talked about the different pronunciations of CH last week. Ch as in chop, k as in school, and sh as in machine. However, with synthetic phonics, we teach sounds and how to spell them. We don't very much teach about spellings and how to pronounce them. It's mainly from sounds to letters, from phoneme to grapheme. And then we've got tricky words. They're sometimes called exception words or irregular words, but I like tricky. It's a child-friendly term. They may be tricky because they have an unusual spelling, like ERE in there, or because they have a common spelling that hasn't yet been taught. For example, little is a common word, and LE for ul is a common spelling. But little is a tricky word if children haven't yet been taught that LE at the end of a word is usually ul. As Beth explained, we don't teach these words as sight words that have to be memorized as wholes. We teach the tricky part. So with the word little, we tell children, little is a tricky word. We show them how it's written, and we point at the letters and say, U, I, T, U, little. That's tricky. We write T with two letters, and we write O like this. And I point at the LE. Now, with that background in place, I'm going to talk about the lessons themselves. Synthetic phonics lessons are interactive, lively, and multisensory. They're interactive because they go, teacher, children, teacher, children. The teacher says or shows or does something, and all the children respond. They're lively because the teacher moves from one activity to another at a fast pace. They're multisensory because the children use their eyes to look at letters and words. They use their ears to listen to the teacher saying sounds and words. And this is important, they listen to their own voices saying sounds and words. The doing part includes several activities according to the program, but the most important one that is always included is writing. In every lesson, children learn sound-to-letter correspondences. They read words by blending sounds. They spell words by identifying the sounds in those words, and they write, forming letters correctly. The same routine is followed in every lesson, and that helps to make the lesson fast-paced, because both the children and the teacher know what's coming next, and children like routine, although the routine varies a little from one program to another. Here's the order in Jolly Phonics. Jolly Phonics is one of the fastest paced programs, but all the programs introduce the sounds quickly. In Jolly Phonics, children are taught a new sound every day until they've been taught 42 sounds. Of course, realistically, there are days when the phonics lesson doesn't happen for some reason. There's a storm and school's been closed, or it's Thanksgiving, and so on. But to teach Jolly Phonics well, all the sounds should be introduced within the first 12 weeks at least. I'm often told by teachers that the children in their class can't possibly learn that fast. Well, first, I'm talking about teaching, not learning. Some children will learn at that pace, but most will take longer. But they're practicing and consolidating every day as they read and spell words that include their new sound and the sounds they learned in previous lessons. So if they don't remember a new sound to letter correspondence the first time, it's not a problem. And it's easier to learn the sounds and letters when you use them often to read and spell words. When I describe a lesson in a few minutes, you'll see that I lead the children through, so even if they can't do it all on their own, they can do it with me. Sometimes when I've been training teachers, someone has said that the children they teach won't be able to do it that fast. And then somebody else says, oh, but I thought they wouldn't be able to do it, but I tried and it's amazing. They're fine with it. Here are the sounds that are introduced in the first week with Jolly Phonics. S, a, t, I, p. On the third day, the children are taught to blend sounds to read at and sat. Now I'm going to describe a lesson for the beginning of the second week when the children are taught the sound n. It's a little difficult to demonstrate when you can't see me, but I'll do my best. If I'm using Jolly Phonics, I start by playing the songs. Then the children know it's time for phonics. The snake is in the grass, the snake is in the grass, the snake is in the grass. And then I go over what they did in the last lesson. I show the children cards with letters on them, and the children say the sounds. I, s, t, a, p. I show the children words that they practiced in the last lesson, and the children read them. P, a, t, pat, t, I, p, tip. I say words that they practiced in the last lesson, and the children repeat the words and tell me the sounds. Pit, p, I, t. And I write the letters on the board, and then we read the word. P, I, t, pit. Next, I introduce the new sound with a story. Today, I'm going to tell you a story about Megan. Megan went fishing with her grandpa. Grandpa said, "You must be quiet so that the fish won't hear you." And Megan was very quiet, like this. But then there was a noise. What do you think it was? It was an aeroplane. Can you make a noise like an aeroplane? And the children put their arms out like an aeroplane and say, mm. Then I teach them the letter for n. I hold up a card with the letter N and say, this is N. What? No, I don't. I say, this is mm. What is it? And the children say, mm. I point at N in different places in the room, and the children say, mm. But I don't use the letter name N. Next, I ask them to read words with n. I hold up cards with words, or I write words on the board, and the children read as I point at the letters. T, I, n, tin, a, n, t, ant. Notice that I don't avoid words like ant, where the children have to blend consonants, n, t, nt, because although some children find it more difficult, they're all being exposed to it, and that's the first step. Next, I ask the children to identify the sounds in words like this. I say, I want you to help me spell pan. And the children say, pan, p, a, n. And they pinch a finger for each sound. Then they say the sounds again as I write the letters on the board. P, a, n. I say, let's check. I point at the letters and the children say, p, a, n, pan. Then I teach the children to form the letter N. I say, this is how we write n, and I demonstrate on the board. We go straight down, then up the line and over and straight down again and a flick. In England, we teach children to form some letters with a flick at the end to make it easier for them later when they're taught to join letters. Then I say, now everyone stand up, hold up your writing finger. And I describe the movement again as the children write in the air. I usually start the lesson with children sitting close to me on a carpet, and then when we begin writing, they move to a chair and table. It makes a break, it stretches their legs, and it means I can check their posture when they're writing. But not all teachers do this. So I say, now you write n, and they move to their tables where there's something ready for them to write with, and they write N. I'm going to go back again to there. I haven't finished the lesson yet. Next, I dictate sounds. This is for practice and assessment. I say, for example, show me T, and they write T. Show me I, and they write I, and so on, finishing with the new sound, N. I walk round checking whether they know which letter to use and how to form it correctly. I make a mental note of who can and who can't do it, and then I show them the correct letter on the board. But I don't spend time correcting individual children, because that would take too long and the other children would get bored. But later in the day, I help children form letters correctly, either in groups or individually. And we finish the lesson with a jolly phonics song for N. Hear the aeroplane, N. Hear the aeroplane, N. Hear the aeroplane, N. Making lots of noise. And the children sing along. So there's an example of a jolly phonics lesson. Other synthetic phonics trainers would probably do it differently, but they'd all stick to a routine and they'd all include the same activities: practice from previous lessons, sound to letter correspondence, reading words, identifying the sounds in words, forming letters, and dictation. Do you know why Jolly Phonics teaches the sounds in this order, not A, B, C, D, E? Well, it's because the teacher can choose so many words to practice reading and spelling really early on when they're teaching. How many words do you think you could make with S-A-T-I-P-N when they're pronounced S-A-T, I-P, N? Well, I can't give you time today to write them down, but here are the ones I found. There are a lot. The children may not know what they all mean, but they can still try to read them. For example, they may not know what sap is. First they read it. S-A-P, sap. Then the teacher says, do you know what sap is? It's the sticky stuff that comes out of some trees. So first the children read the word, and then they learn what it means. Let's look at how synthetic phonics teaching progresses from simple to complex. We'll look at an example, the sound E. First, the children are taught E spelt with E-E as in C, and then a few months later they're taught that sometimes E is spelt with E alone, as in me, he, she, we, be. Next, they're taught that sometimes E is spelt with Y at the end of words like happy. Then EA, as in eat. Eventually, in a year or two, they look again at different spellings for E, and they learn to use the correct one to spell specific words. Here's an example of a lesson to teach EA as E. I'll be quiet for a minute while you look at it. By the way, the upside down E represents the tiny sound in little, lit, oh, oh. That symbol is for adults, not for children. Lit, oh. You can see how this lesson plan is basically the same as the lesson I described to you for the sound N. But now it includes a tricky word, a sentence to read, and word dictation. The next stage is to learn about morphemes. That's root words, prefixes, and suffixes. If you know the word lock and the prefix un and the suffix ing, you don't have to say all the phonemes and blend them. A, n, u, o, k, I, n. You just say the morphemes and blend them. Un, lock, ing, unlocking. Later word dictation could look like this, when the children have been taught the suffix shus, as in voracious and ambitious. And sentence dictation could look like this, when the children have been taught to spell the sound k with the letters QUE, as in unique and picturesque. Okay, now I'm going to talk about practice and application. This is so important, and it's going wrong in about 2/3 of schools in England. In these schools, teachers teach a phonics lesson and then they forget all about it and carry on with the mixed strategy teaching that they're more familiar with. But it's essential that children practice and apply the phonics they've been taught in the phonics lesson. They must practice the skills taught in the lesson. And this is especially important for children who struggle to keep up. When they can spell words, at least phonologically correctly, and form letters correctly, they can begin to write independently. Here's an example of early independent writing. It's wonderful for teachers to see the children they've been teaching beginning to write like this. On May, me and my friends went camping. In the evening, we had marshmallows. Some friends slept outside and some friends slept inside. They heard flapping of wings. It was a bird. They went back to sleep. So Ian was 5 years old. I think he was American, learning with Jolly Phonics in the US. He'd been learning Jolly Phonics for several weeks. And he was a typical child in the class. Next, I'm going to talk about helping children who struggle to keep up, and then I'll talk about reading books. Beth told you about a study of children taught using the Sound Discovery Programme and how 94% of those children achieved average and above average levels of reading at 11. This success rate was explained by the fact that children who needed to close the reading gap with their peers were identified and given extra help in their first year at school. If you have a child in your class who's struggling to keep up or joins you from another school and can't read, first you need to know whether that child is SPED or ABT. I'm sure you all know what SPED stands for, special education. Obviously, if a child has special educational needs, you have to understand those needs and cater for them. What about ABT? I got ABT from Ruth Miskin, who wrote the Read Write Inc. program. ABT stands for Ain't Been Taught, because some children really don't have any special educational needs that mean they need different teaching for reading and writing. They simply need more practice than most children because they have poor memories, or they don't hear the sounds very well, or they may have a diagnosis of dyslexia. For whatever reason, they find phonics difficult. Or maybe they've joined your class late, and in their last school, they were taught to guess words. Or they weren't taught enough of the alphabetic code to read as well as the other children in your class. These children need extra teaching and extra practice as early as possible so that they don't get further and further behind. It's no good waiting for them to be ready. They may never be ready. And if they're left without extra help, they'll begin to feel like failures. I'm sure you've come across children who withdraw or behave badly to compensate. And if you delay providing help, in the end, they'll need remedial help anyway. The aim should be for all children to keep up, not for some to have to catch up later. So with good synthetic phonics teaching, extra phonics lessons are provided every day for the children who need them until these children can keep up with the rest of the class. If they continue to struggle to keep up, extra lessons continue as long as it takes until they can read well enough to access a high school curriculum. With synthetic phonics, it's understood that these children don't need something different from the others. They just need more practice. These are the essential activities to help children keep up. Practice letter-sound correspondences, blend sounds to read words, identify sounds in spoken words for spelling, and practice forming letters correctly. There's other activities that help as well, but these are the essential ones. Now I want to talk to you about reading books. You may remember from Beth's talk that the children in the Sound Discovery study benefited from the development of short, age-appropriate, decodable books to provide practice in reading. I'm going to show you 3 books, all used to teach children to read. Here's the first. In the actual book, there are 5 pages with a picture and a sentence on each page. Imagine you have a child Imagine you've got a child who's been learning with Jolly Phonics for about 10 weeks. Which words could you not expect that child to read? It's most of them. I've highlighted the graphemes they would not know. They might be able to read a, cell, and can, and that's all. This is not for synthetic phonics teaching, it's whole language. The teacher's supposed to look at the picture with the child and introduce the vocabulary. Look at all the pictures with the child. There's a lot of repetition. What does a? What does a? What does a? The child is expected to remember the words. Of course, some children can learn to read this way, but most can't. Here's another. Again, a sentence and picture on each page. Again, imagine you have a child who's been learning with Jolly Phonics for about 10 weeks. You could expect that child to read lots of the words in this book. Can, get, an, yes, on, run, van, big, look, at, that, out, kipper, splat. But there are several words that child could not be expected to read accurately. I've highlighted the letter sound correspondences that child would not have been taught. Look at the title. Right at the start, there are 2 words that can't be decoded at this stage, ice and cream. There's a picture of an ice cream in the book, so the children are expected to look at the picture and guess. The child who finds phonics easy will begin to pick up the phonics in words like ice cream. They'll notice the C in ice is pronounced S, and they'll begin to recognize it in other words. But the child who finds phonics difficult immediately gets the message that it's not worth trying phonics, that guessing is better. So that child will get in the habit of guessing unfamiliar words, and with text for older children, the guess is likely to be wrong. That's balanced literacy. Unfortunately, in many schools in England, the teachers are teaching a synthetic phonics lesson and then asking the children to read books like this. Synthetic phonics is not so effective if you ask children to read books like this. Here's the last one. Again, a sentence and picture on each page. Again, imagine you have a child who's been learning with Jolly Phonics for about 10 weeks. Can you see any words you could not expect that child to have a go at reading accurately? I identified the words to, of, and have, and that's all. This is based on synthetic phonics teaching. It's designed to be decodable at an early stage. Those 3 words, to, of, and have, are very common, and with synthetic phonics, you teach them before asking a child to read this book. In some ways, this book looks more sophisticated than the other books, but it's much easier to decode. Decodable books are books the reader can decode. If you can decode Shakespeare, then Shakespeare's decodable for you. But if you're only 4, 5, or 6 years old and you haven't been learning to read for very long, then you can't decode many words. Your teacher must choose your book carefully and then ask you to read the chosen book with no guessing. Although I said that those first 2 books were not suitable and you shouldn't use them, I didn't mean you should hold children back. If you have children who find phonics easy, you can expose them to a wide range of literature, as long as they can decode most of the words. If you have a child who can decode most of the words in Beatrix Potter's Peter Rabbit, you can offer that child a Peter Rabbit book to read. Here's a book from the non-fiction series, No Nonsense Phonics. I changed the letters in the box to different symbols. If a child's been taught to look at the picture first and then guess a familiar word, What would that child guess? Monkey? Gorilla? If a child's been taught, as in synthetic phonics, to look at the word first and then the picture, here's what the child would read. A, N, man, D, R, E, L, drill, mandrill. It's straightforward to decode. Then the picture shows the child what a mandrill is. And now there's a new word in the child's vocabulary. If a book has no pictures, the written context can usually help with the meaning of new vocabulary. Context is not good for guessing how to read words, but it's very good for comprehension. The child who can't read asks, "What is this word?" The child who can read asks, "What does this word mean?" And I'll leave you with that. Thank you for listening. I'll hand you back to Jenny before I answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We do have some questions. One that came in was, at what age do you leave phonemic awareness activities and start a systematic phonics approach? Elizabeth, would you speak to that?
Okay, with synthetic phonics, you do both together. You don't provide phonemic awareness activities and then start a systematic phonics program. With synthetic phonics, children become phonemically aware as they learn about the correspondences between sounds and letters and practice blending phonemes to read words and identifying phonemes in words to spell them. It's great if they come to school having already learned lots of rhymes and played games with sounds, but it's not a prerequisite. I've got a quote about this. I got it from a summary of the US National Reading Panel report. Phonemic awareness taught with letters is more effective than phonemic awareness taught without letters. Letters help children grasp and manipulate sounds that are ephemeral. I don't know how to pronounce that, ephemeral. Letters also help children transfer their phonemic awareness skills to reading and writing tasks. And there was some research in Australia where they assessed children's phonemic awareness before beginning a synthetic phonics program. 2 years later, there was no significant correlation between the children's phonemic awareness before the program and their reading and spelling achievement 2 years later. So with synthetic phonics, there's no need to provide phonemic awareness activities before starting systematic phonics teaching.
Beth, another question has just come in. Do you explicitly teach letter names at some point?
Yes, we do. Yes, and that varies from program to program. There's one program I know where they do actually introduce them together, but it's made very, very clear. That's the Phonics Bug program. At the very beginning, they sing an alphabet song, but it's made very clear after that that you're using the sounds for reading. All the other programs I'm aware of think it's better not to teach the names at the beginning because it can confuse children if you teach sounds and names at the same time. Jolly Phonics teaches the names after the first 12 weeks. Once the children are familiar with the sounds and are using them well, they then introduce the letter names and the alphabet, and other programs do it later. But the important thing with synthetic phonics is the children are very clear that they use the sounds for reading and not the letter names.
Elizabeth, is this program expensive for school districts to purchase?
Oh, well, there's no one price I could quote to you because it depends on the program. And of course, there are two costs. There's the cost of resources and the cost of training. Jenny told me that I was going to be asked this question, so I wrote to some program authors today and publishers and asked them about their prices. And the answers were quite mixed, but here's a quick overview. Jolly Phonics is the program that's been in the US for a long time, and the Jolly Phonics handbook now costs $42.50, and you can teach the program with just the handbook. But it's better if you have more. The class kits cost between $400 and $2,000. The most expensive have an interactive electronic whiteboard program as well. And there's a very good online training with Jolly Phonics that costs $130. Phonics International is about $50 for a single user for a year's license, $140 for a multi-user license for a whole school, and $600 for a lifetime. A class pack of floppy phonics sounds and letters is about $1,500. Doesn't include training. Sounds Right provides resources only when you attend the training. So you pay for training and resources together. And the training takes 4 days and costs $600 for each teacher. And Sound Discovery works, the sound reading system works in a similar way, but they charge $370 for each teacher. I'm not sure how many days they do. The Sound Discovery, the books with snappy lessons, are about $47 each, and there are 7 books. The whole program pack you can get for $860, and then there's additional resources like handwriting and storybooks, which are $400. But again, that doesn't include training. I do training in Jolly Phonics and Sound Discovery and Letters and Sounds, which I haven't mentioned. And I charge $1,000 for a day's training in a school for any number of teachers, plus my travel and accommodation expenses. But that doesn't include resources because I'm not a publisher. Usually schools ask me for only 1 day, but I prefer to do longer courses, and then I charge less per day. So I hope that gives you a sort of overview of the costs.
Yes, thank you. A question came in, is synthetic phonics different from Orton Gillingham-based programs? And I think I'll speak to that. I would say that they are cousins in that they're both phonics-based and systematic, and they both are a means to the same end, that is skillful decoding, so that students can focus their attention on comprehending text. Here are some differences. As Elizabeth mentioned, the pace of covering the letter sounds is very fast in synthetic phonics, even for very young students. It has surprised many a teacher that this is as doable as it is. A second difference, as a result of that fast pace, synthetic phonics programs cover much of the alphabetic code fairly quickly, including, for example, less common spellings like OUL for in could and should. A third difference, as was also pointed out in the previous question, is waiting to teach letter names till later in the program. So a synthetic phonics program wouldn't teach b, bat, the way some more traditional phonics programs in the US would. Another difference, Orton Gillingham based programs may teach some words either as wholes, such as the word said, or as onset and rhyme, such as sang, rang, bang. Synthetic phonics always focuses instruction at the phoneme level. So for a tricky word like said, the teacher would underline the AI spelling and instruct students to say there. Then they would start at the beginning of the word and say the sound said and point out that it's a tricky word due to that spelling. A fifth difference, Orton Gillingham based programs teach many rules typically that students need to remember, and synthetic phonics programs teach a flexible approach to word decoding. An example would be trying the short vowel sound first in an unfamiliar word, and if that doesn't work, simply try the long vowel sound. And another difference is in the training, the complexity of the training. The training for most synthetic phonics programs can be accomplished in 2 or 3 days, and the teaching routines are fairly simple to carry out once the instructor knows what needs to be included in each lesson. That said, training is always crucial for any research-based program. Elizabeth, I'll have you either add to that if you want to, or question 4 or 5 is this program best used alone, or can it be used in conjunction with a traditional phonics program?
Well, first, I think you covered the bit about Orton Gillingham very thoroughly, so thank you, Jenny. But in answer to whether the program is best used alone or can be used in conjunction with a traditional phonics program, the answer is no, synthetic phonics should not be used in conjunction with other phonics programs, especially if the other programs encourage memorizing sight words and guessing from context. But if you understand synthetic phonics very well, and that is crucial, you can be much more flexible, and you can choose resources from other publishers to supplement your program. And for example, I think the most important one is to get as many books from publishers who produce books based on this method, and for the children to practice reading the books that we call decodable. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Well,
Jenny?
actually, I will. I happen to know that one of your handouts that I will be emailing to folks is gives a list of some decodable book series. And I will say that I get a lot of my decodable books from England. They definitely are ahead of the game on decodable books. There are some really fabulous resources. So that will be sent out to all attendees. I don't see any other questions here. So thank you very much, Elizabeth, for providing us with a clear and concise explanation of what a synthetic phonics looks like and why. It was
Thank
very
you.
it was very
Yeah.
informative, and I hope it's leaving people with a thirst for more. Now is a good time to let people know that there may be an opportunity for some schools in southern Maine with kindergarten or with preschool to obtain free training in Jolly Phonics for multiple teachers and free materials for one classroom. Please email me if this is an opportunity you would like to learn more about. My email address is jennifer.smithbrock with no hyphen at maine.edu, or you can find my contact information on our website, www.smartlearninglab.org, where this webinar will be posted fairly shortly, and our past webinars are available there as well. I invite administrators and classroom teachers to join us on Monday, April 4th, when Kelly Williamson will talk about how to explain learning standards and reports to parents using an online database system. Thank you, attendees, for joining us, and have a great evening.